May 13th, 2021. It was a day not unlike many other days. It was a Thursday. And I had just come back from a trip up in New York for a fitting and was feeling really good about my game. But on this day, I really learned a lesson about how close we all are to dying. But for the grace of God, I am here still. Now, I suffer from IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. I have a lot of gastrointestinal issues, so feeling sick to my stomach or having episodes is something that happens frequently for me. I started feeling sick in the evening and thought I was just going to have another one of my episodes. And initially it started out that way, but my stomach started to feel very distended. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, I got up and I hadn't been able to sleep, but I was pretty sure that I needed to throw up. And understand that I don't throw up. I believe I've thrown up 3 times since college, and that's over 30 years ago. Well, I was throwing up, and it was an awful lot, which was really bizarre because I simply hadn't eaten that much because I hadn't felt very well for most of the later part of the day. But there was something that was very different about this when I threw up. It kind of smelled like poop. Yeah, I know, it's disgusting. And I was kind of worried. I'm like, that doesn't seem right, obviously. So I consulted Dr. Google to find out throw up that smells like poop. And sure enough, right away came up blocked bowel. And I thought, wow, no, I don't think I could have a blocked bowel. I mean, I guess I could have a blocked bowel, but I mean, that's serious, and nothing serious ever happens to me. So while I felt a little bit better after getting sick, my stomach still felt distended. And after being very uncomfortable for a couple more hours, I actually started throwing up again. And again had the smell of poop. And so I was pretty sure I was going to have to go to the hospital because something clearly was wrong. So I went to my next door neighbor and who's up very early, and it was about 5:30 in the morning at this point, and asked if he could run me to the hospital. I figured I would at least save the cost of the ambulance. Now, my wife actually had just left the evening before to go up to her parents' house because her parents were going to have to take them to some various doctor's appointments and things like that. And that's up in northwestern PA. It's about 5 hours away. And I called her at 5:30 in the morning and told her that I thought something was seriously wrong and I was on my way to the hospital. And so she had to pack up her stuff and start to drive back. When I got to the hospital, I told them what I thought had happened, and they rushed me right back and they performed a CT scan. Which is something that they can scan the body and they can see inside fairly well. It's pretty cool. And they were able to tell that my intestine had a blockage in it. Completely blocked. And they said this was very serious, that it can rupture. Your intestine can rupture, and if it does, then, well, it's pretty caustic, of course, inside your body, and you're probably going to die. So they said, we got to get you back right away. Well, it had been a few hours, probably about 3.5 hours since I had called my wife, and I told her that the surgeon, I had her on speakerphone, and the surgeon had said, like, we need to go in right away because usually these things can occur if you've had some sort of intestinal surgery before, and I haven't, and so they were very concerned as to why it would be blocked because it just shouldn't be happening. So they took me back and started getting me prepped, and thankfully my wife got to the hospital right before they had to take me back in for surgery. And a few hours later, I came out of surgery, and the surgeons started to fill us in on what they actually found and what they had to do. The first thing they have to do is that they've got to get to the intestines, which is basically below your abdomen or your stomach, your belly. And so they had to cut me open. Now, I'm going to show you a slightly censored picture here, and I'll show the regular picture here in just a little bit, just so that you're prepared if you want to look away or turn the video off. But it's a huge incision. I had 14 staples holding it together. My entire stomach is black and blue, as you can see. And that's because they had to cut me open, and then they had to get all of my intestines out to inspect them. In order to do that, they cut all the fascia tissue, which connects basically your stomach muscles to the insides, like your intestines, and holds all that in place. And so I was very grateful that they didn't have to cut any of my muscles, because that would be a much harder recovery for golf, obviously. What's important, right? Once they were able to cut the fascia tissue loose, they were able to move the muscles enough out of the way to take my intestines out. At that point, they inspected all of them, and they found a section that was about 6 inches that was blocked, and it was from scarring. Somehow there was scarring on the inside, as well as the lymph nodes, which I learned, we have lymph nodes attached to our intestinal tract, were just unusually shaped and were not in good condition. So they decided to cut that section out and then piece me back together. So they took about 6 inches of my intestine out, put it back together, and then they put everything back inside. Now, the difficulty with that is that they didn't put it back exactly the way that God put it in there, and so your intestinal tract has to kind of relearn how to do things. You know, your digestion system is not like pipes in a house where it all flows kind of downhill. It kind of goes down and around and up and down, and so everything has to work together. And what we learned is that, you know, they said it's kind of like the heart. You know, like there are a number of chambers, and if they don't beat in the exact right or contract in just the right order, blood doesn't move through right. And in the digestive system, the system has to move things along in the tract. And when they open you up and they pull out the intestine, it all basically stops. And so the difficulty is getting it all back to work again. How do we get that to happen? And I ended up spending 19 days in the hospital for two main reasons. The first one was I was unable to get the intestinal tract to start working. I ended up losing 20 pounds in 19 days because I couldn't eat anything, or if I did eat something, it would come back up not long after. And that's because the food wasn't moving along. It basically would go so far and just stop. And this is a real problem. But one of the problems with it is that I was under the care of the surgeons. And while the surgeons are brilliant people, and they certainly know anatomy, and they can do incredible things, taking your intestines out, cutting it apart, put it back together, and put you back in, and you're still alive. It's pretty great. But they don't seem to really understand how to make people healthy. So after about 15 days, I decided to ask for a GI consult, a gastrointestinal specialist to come in, who basically came in and said that all the food that they have been feeding me was the worst possible thing they could be doing. And that's for a number of reasons. One, the food that they were feeding me creates gas. And two, as someone who has gastrointestinal issues, that's the last thing that I should have. Now, the surgeons explained to me that a very interesting thing, that the intestines, if you take it out and you hit it with a hammer, you won't hurt it. But if you put a little gas in it and expand it, it's very painful. Now, obviously, from the picture you can see, the surgery was pretty massive and obviously very painful. I was on morphine for it. But eating foods then, that then expanded that, made the pain even worse. I was on morphine, which I was getting every 2 hours, ended up being for almost 19 days. And that was because of the pain involved. So once we figured out what I shouldn't be eating, and consulting with a doctor that we work with on our health, we found out what I should be eating. Very quickly, the pain started to dissipate, and I was able to move off of the IV meds to an oral med, which allowed me then to be able to leave the hospital. That was terrible. And it was great that I was able to get out of the hospital, but that was not nearly the end of the story because, well, there are a number of issues. The first thing is that my intestines were basically floating around. The fascia tissue wasn't attached, and it's going to take a while for that to regrow. And the reason why that's important is that, well, see, the doctors have me on a weight limit. I'm not allowed to lift more than 10 pounds or use more than 10 pounds of force that would involve my core at all because I can very easily get a hernia. Because my intestines aren't really attached to anything, anytime I would move, they would move, which is a very weird feeling and very uncomfortable. It's limited what I can do. Of course, with golf, this makes it very difficult to be able to turn, let alone have any speed whatsoever. I also, because of the weight that I lost, I actually ended up losing a lot of muscle as a result because I didn't really move a lot. I was pretty much on my back except for trying to get up a couple of times a day to walk. I became very weak. A lot of the muscles, as my coach has told me, are there, but neurologically they're not being stimulated. So, for instance, my glutes, my butt muscles. I don't have the butt I used to have. And when I told him that, he's like, well, can you clench it? And then they can come up. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it does. Like, well, the muscles didn't really leave, but we have to reactivate them. And so that's part of what I have to do as part of my recovery is I've got to re-stimulate or get my muscles to work again neurologically. But I did lose strength. When I first time I picked up a golf club just to see how it was, I was shocked at how heavy the golf club is. So it's about 6 weeks now from the surgery, and I'm alive, and I'm healthy, and I will continue to be. The difficulty really is regaining my strength, and as far as golf goes, is strength and speed and endurance. And that's going to be a tough go of it. I've had to withdraw from a lot of golf tournaments. It's right in the middle of the golf season. And I know that it's not the most important thing being alive is. And God saved me for a reason. And I still feel that that's for golf. I'm not going to be able to do the work that I used to be able to do. And so I have to make this golf thing work. So if you could help me out by hitting that like button, it would really help me out. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe because I'm going to have to make this a go somehow to support me. And your support would be greatly appreciated. In the coming weeks, I'm going to be having some videos on, I'm going to have, my plan is to have a weekly vlog of just kind of my progress and the things that I'm working on. And then I still want to have my basic instructional type videos at least once a week as well, talking about various aspects of the game that would hopefully help you to get better. So hopefully this video kind of explains what's happened with me, why I haven't been around. Of course, before this I had the broken ribs, but I'm looking forward to getting better. I have a match play tournament coming up that I'm going to give it a shot in just a few days, and I think there's a chance that I can win it. Playing a very good player and by the name of Chris Espenshade. I'm going to take some video along there as best I can to kind of give you a little bit of an update on that. So until next time, enjoy the walk. I know I am.